Somebody linked this to me the other day, and I didn't read over it because I don't like reading very long articles. It feels like I'm kind of content ripping, and it doesn't seem very interesting to the viewer, apart from just getting to listen to me read stuff. It's also very tiring to read something, then react, then read, then react. I don't get much time to breathe. But then in between last stream and this one, I did read a little bit of it, and wow, this is getting a lot of traction. The extreme ambitions of West Bank settlers. Extreme ambitions is euphemistic here. It is very clear where the interviewer stands with regards to this. Isaac Chotiner conducted an interview where he spoke to a settler in Israel. And to be clear, by the way, by settler, what we mean here, we don't mean like the sort of ambiguous, oh, well, they're in historically Palestinian territory. What they mean in this case is a person in the West Bank who deliberately, willfully volunteered to take a Palestinian's home and occupy it because they want to be personally involved in the conquest of this territory and the displacement of Palestinian people. So this is, yeah. So this is why I want to be careful with terms like settler, because, okay, so is every American a settler in the like historical context of our war on sure, fine, sure. But this person is a settler, capital S, settler. Vosh should be noted that it's a fairly prominent settler, not just some rando. That's true. Daniela Weiss. I think I'd heard, or it's Weiss, or not Weiss, right? That would be like German. It's Weiss, yeah. I've actually heard of this person before. We can take a look at the demon we're about to read about. Looks so nice. So nice. Wow. Reading this interview, I only read about a third of it, by the way. Gotta save some stuff for content. Has given me a lot of respect for the interviewer, so I'm probably going to check out some other stuff Isaac has done in the past, and I suggest you do so as well. Let me drink a bit of water first. We're in it to win it. I want to say, by the way, why I'm doing this. Part of it's just because it's plain interesting in a very grim human interest kind of way. A lot of it is also because I think it's important to understand the psychology of evil people. For the same reason that I think most people could benefit from going back and reading about the interviews of like the Nuremberg trials, the Nazi officials who were questioned and interrogated, blah, blah, because I think it's useful to understand how people internally motivate their behavior. The point of this is not to just go, she's evil, because if that was my message and takeaway from this, I would just say that after reading every line from her. What I'm going to be doing instead is trying to read through this in a bit more of a dispassionate way. And if you want, you can insert in your mind me saying, wow, she's evil, after every sentence. Like you can keep that here so I don't have to say it every single time. Okay? For decades, Daniela Weiss has been one of the leaders of Israel's settlement movement. Weiss became involved in settlement politics in the wake of the 1967 war. In the early 70s, her family moved to the settlements in the West Bank, and she later served for a decade as mayor of Kedemim, a community in the north. She has also been arrested numerous times, including for assaulting a police officer and interfering with an investigation into the destruction of Palestinian property. More recently, she has been affiliated with the Nachla Settlement Organization, which helps younger settlers establish illegal outposts in the West Bank, an initiative that's controversial even among the settler community. Weiss is a neighbor and an ally of Bezalel Smotrich, the extremist minister of finance, who has said that the Palestinian people do not exist and Palestinian communities need to be erased. He also lives in Kedemim. Weiss and I recently spoke by phone. Since the Hamas massacre of October 7th, Benjamin Netanyahu's government, in addition to invading Gaza, has, with its allies in the settler movement, become increasingly aggressive in the West Bank. 16 Palestinian communities have been removed from their land, and 175 Palestinians have been killed. I wanted to talk to Weiss to provide context on this again. Remember how small Israel is. Remember how few Palestinians there are. 175 Palestinians have been murdered in a month in the West Bank alone. I wanted to talk to Weiss to understand the extremism of the settler movement and her ultimate intentions for the West Bank. During our conversation, edited for length and clarity, we also discussed how her religious attitudes shape her view of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, why human rights should not be considered universal, and why she should not be expected to mourn for dead Palestinian children. Right off the bat, I think the framing being done here in this article is excellent journalism. Journalism is not meant to be dispassionate. It's meant to bring attention to important issues, and her being evil is the important issue here. There's no reason to banty it about. Isaac asks, "Where are you from?" She responds, "I was born in Israel in 1945, 3 years before the birth of the modern Jewish state. I was born in the Tel Aviv area." The interviewer asks, "And your parents?" She responds, "My father was born in the United States. My mother was born in Warsaw, Poland, and she immigrated with her parents to Israel when she was a year old. So she came to Israel many years before the state of Israel was born." The interviewer asks, "How would you describe the settler movement?" And she responds, "I see the settler movement today as a direct continuation of the settler movement of 120, 30, 40 years ago. I see it as a chapter in the history of Zionism, and we are in one of those chapters of modern Zionism. Settlement is the way to return to Zion." The interviewer asks, "You said settlement is the way to return to Zion?" And she replies, "Yes, it's the end of the dispersion and the beginning of the revival of the Jewish nation in this homeland." Yes, here is the fascist myth. Yes, exactly. So we sort of like we're ticking our boxes when it comes to Umberto Eco's points on fascism. This is the fatherland. This is the origin myth. This is like the national pretext. Extreme nationalism is like the bedrock of fascism. So, we're laying our, right. Yeah, Ein Reich, ein Volk. Exactly. Isaac asks, "What are the borders of that Jewish nation?" And she replies, "The borders of the homeland of the Jews are the Euphrates in the east and the Nile in the southwest." Interviewers note, "This would include the territory of multiple Middle Eastern countries as well as the territory that Israel controls today." Let me pull up a map. So the Euphrates is here. Euphrates, I forget. And the Nile, as you might recall, is in Egypt. But let me just get the exact location. Just so we're okay. So per her description, we have this, which runs pretty near to the Red Sea in eastern Egypt, to the Euphrates, which would cover most of Syria, about half of Iraq, and depending on exactly where you want to draw the southern and northern lines, quite possibly all of Jordan and a good portion of Saudi Arabia. This is the, if we're checking off our boxes, if we're trying to tick everything off, this is the Lebensraum. This is the greater Germany that they said they were building when they invaded their neighbors. Again, ticking the boxes point by point. The idea of Jewish territory being this large and this wide in scope is ridiculous from a historical perspective anyway. Yeah, there's not even enough Jews in the world to fill that. Not even close. There's not the idea oh yeah, my people actually were everywhere. Well, there's people of all kinds everywhere today because they travel. What would you do with that territory? She meant around the earth the other way. Ah, yes, there we go. Oh, yeah, here we go. Greater Israel. This definitely wouldn't cause any geopolitical conflict. Well, anyway, yeah. So again, in addition to the extreme ultranationalism, the founding myth, we also have the "we were a great empire that we must return to." Note how it always has to be framed in the context of historical territory. She can't just say, "Yeah, I want to conquer more territory because I want to have more territory," which would be honest, Instead, it has to be this, it's like blood and soil shit. This belonged to our people thousands of years ago. Therefore, it is ours by right. It always has to be framed that way. Fascists always do this, with essentially no exceptions. Isaac asks, "There's a Palestinian slogan that has become very controversial. From the river to the sea, which means from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. It's controversial because it would include all the land that currently makes up Israel. But you're saying from the river to the..." She replies, "What is controversial?" Isaac continues, "Palestinians sometimes use the slogan from the river to the sea, but what you're saying is that from the river to the Nile is the Jewish homeland, correct?" And she replies, "Of course. If someone decides to invent a new religion today, who will decide the rules? The first nation that got the word from God, the promise from God, The first nation is the one who has the right to it. The others that follow, Christianity and Islam, with their demands, with their perceptions, they're imitating what existed already. So why in Israel? They could be anywhere in the world. They came after us in the double sense of the word. So again, in addition to founding myth here, this is also like the most conservative and orthodox interpretation of Jewish text and the whole chosen people thing. Vosh, this sounds like literal Hitler shit. It is. This is literal Hitler shit. It is the basic same set of principles and social forces applied to Jews rather than Aryans. That's it. It's otherwise essentially identical. Like the idea of calling Israel the first people, the first religion, the first nation, this is as laughable anthropologically as arguing that like the ancient Aryans were like 8 foot tall giants. Like this is the same shit the Nazis said, where they would make up these ridiculous, ludicrous, ahistorical lies about their ancestry, because it in some way justified their current national ambitions. Isaac asks, when did you first get involved in the settler movement? And she replies, in 1967, in the 6-Day War. The 6-Day War was such a miracle and aroused very deep feelings toward the birthplace of our nation, Hebron, Shiloh, Jericho, Nablus, and because of the miracle of the war, we had this spiritual sensation that something happened in the dimensions of a biblical scene. I felt that I wanted to be an active part in this miraculous happening. My husband didn't like the idea of moving from Tel Aviv to the mountains of Judea and Samaria. He liked our life near Tel Aviv. But then, when the Yom Kippur War broke out in 1973, I became involved in a very intensive way, and so did my husband. We both became part of the settler movement of Gush Emunim, the movement that established communities in Judea and Samaria. I forced my... Yeah, one moment. I would like to look up where Samaria is. Okay, Samaria is in the West Bank, which makes sense. At least it overlaps significantly with the West Bank. Samaria, in reference to Israel, includes a significant portion of the West Bank. So she's referring to going to this area back in like the 70s, around the time when this area would have been much more densely populated with Palestinian people, more widely spread. Judea is all of Israel south of Samaria. I forced my husband to follow me and our 2 daughters, they were little ones, to a tiny tent on the mountains of Samaria, where we all live today. Now we have a big family with 4 generations. My mother-in-law came with us, and then we have our daughters and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They are all settlers in Samaria. So what she's describing essentially is that she saw the 6-Day War as like a religious awakening that encouraged her to force her husband to move out into the West Bank, which she only refers to in historical terms because the West Bank is a modern term that acknowledges the existence of Palestinian people, and start pumping out as many babies as they could. Isaac asks, in a lot of these places where settlements have been developed from 1967 to the present day, there have been Palestinian communities and Palestinian families. What is your feeling about where these people should go? And she replies, it's the opposite. None of the communities in Judea and Samaria are founded on an Arab place or property, and whoever says this is a liar. I wonder why you said it. Why did you say that, since you have no idea about the real facts of history? That's not true. The opposite is true. Who got this idea into your mind? There is so much I could say here. Isaac replies, Palestinian communities have been removed from their land, kicked off their land by, and she replies, no, you never read things like that. No, there are no pictures. So that's the level that she's operating on, essentially. She's essentially saying Judea and Samaria are Jewish territory so fundamentally that not only can no other group live there, but also they can't even be removed from these places because they aren't even there. Like, I imagine that she is thinking of Arabs in this area the same way one might think of squatters, where like they're not even the residents of that land, they're just temporary occupants, like vermin to be shooed out of the territory. She almost certainly thinks of them as vermin to be shooed out of the territory. Editor's note: according to a report by B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights group, part of Kedemim, where Weiss lives, were built on private Palestinian land. In 2006, Peace Now found that privately owned Palestinian land comprised nearly 40% of the territory of West Bank settlements and outposts. Isaac asks, okay, I'm a little surprised you are denying this. I thought you were going to say, it's okay to kick Palestinians off land because it belongs to Jewish people. And she replies, you did no homework before you interviewed me. Everything that you say is the opposite of my personality and my philosophy. You are interviewing a person and you don't know anything about them. It's very strange. I've never encountered a situation like this. The reason she's responding this way is almost certainly because her orbit, the circle of people she talks to and engages with, are almost certainly all hyper-nationalist Zionists. They talk to each other in the same euphemistic language that denies culpability for the crimes they've committed. So the people she knows, her family, her friends, the people she engages with, would probably also think of Palestinians as vermin who temporarily resided in historical Judea and Samaria. So when a person comes along and just flat out says this was Palestinian territory and you kick them off, her response is at first to say, no, you're a liar. But afterwards, her indignation more seems to be, how dare you speak to me that way? Does that make sense? Isaac asks, I was trying to understand where Palestinians who live in the West Bank should go. And she says, why should they go? Why should they go? He continues, they should stay where they are, you're saying? And she replies, they should accept the fact that in the land of Israel, there is only one sovereign. This is the issue. So let's not confuse things. We, the Jews, are the sovereigns in the state of Israel and in the land of Israel. They have to accept it. So what they're essentially saying, she's essentially saying that this is like fundamentally, ontologically, ideologically, metaphysically Jewish land. And as a consequence of that, they don't have a right to speak. Isaac asks, if they accept it, should they receive full voting rights and things like that? And she replies, in the state of Israel, they have the right to vote for the Knesset because Ben Gurion gave them this right. He trusted them, and even if he didn't trust them, he didn't have much of a choice. 3 years after the Holocaust, he wanted to have a state for the Jews, and he knew the world would make problems with the issue of voting. So immediately she's framing this as like, yeah, we knew that you, Gentiles would take issue with us denying Israeli citizens the right to vote if they were Palestinian. But in the 75 years since independence, the Arabs in the state of Israel and the Arab members of the Knesset showed in every possible way that their idea is to establish a Palestinian state. They are not working for the interests of the state of Israel. So I think the Arabs in Judea and Samaria have no right to ask for rights or take part in elections for the Knesset. They lost their right to vote for the Knesset. They will never get this right. They will have their own Palestinian authority where they can run their civilian affairs in a logical way, but not as members of the Knesset. No, no, no. So here she's saying that Palestinians who live within Israel should simply accept second-class citizenship. So pretty direct there. Not much like to interpret. She's just saying it. Isaac asks, so rights are not some sort of universal thing that every person has. There's something you can win or lose. And she replies, that's right. Very direct. Isaac says, you've been part of the settlement movement during a lot of different governments. How do you feel that the current government of the past year has been treating settlers broadly compared with past governments? And she replies, unsurprisingly, I will say that it's better under Netanyahu. It doesn't satisfy my ambitions and my dreams and my plans. But there are 800,000 Jews, or settlers, if you want. So this gives me a lot of encouragement that from 800,000, we will become 2 million, then 3 million. So, yeah, the Lebensraum. Like, literally, like, again, it's as clear as could be. She wants to establish a greater Israel, and she wants to, depose or eradicate the Palestinian population Also, I could be reaching a little bit here, but please keep in mind that if she wasn't talking to a Western interviewer, she would almost certainly say that they should just kill Palestinians. Like, we know this from alt-righters. When Richard Spencer goes on CNN and he's like, we're not white supremacists, we're just white nationalists. Like, let's not be idiots here. We know for a fact that he, along with people like him, joke in private about killing blacks or Jews or Hispanics or whatever else. So let's not pretend that she's not, quietly praising and celebrating the murder of Palestinians when she's not, talking to an interviewer. Isaac says, when you say that the government's been better but hasn't realized your dreams, what are those dreams? And she replies, 2 million Jews in Judea and Samaria, more settlements, more farms, bigger cities. Isaac asks, when you say you want more Jews in the West Bank, is your idea that the Palestinians there and the Jews will live side by side as friends, or that? And she replies, if they accept our sovereignty, they can live here. He asks, so they should accept the sovereign power, but that doesn't necessarily mean having rights. It just means accepting the sovereign power. And she replies, right. No, I'm specifically saying they are not going to have the right to vote for the Knesset. No, no, no. Yeah, so my personal opinion is that here she's lying. What she's saying outwardly is they have to accept being second-class citizens, but what I personally think she believes is just second-class citizenship is the stepping stone in between where we are right now and the complete elimination of the Palestinian people. Her ideology doesn't allow for Palestinians to continue to exist in Greater Israel. She has laid out all the logic for genocide, but, she understandably doesn't want to just say to an interviewer, yeah, I think they should all be killed. Yeah, exactly. She knows that a lot of them would not accept second-class citizenship, thus forcing her to unfortunately have to kill them all. Notice how she said that Palestinians should forfeit their right to vote in the Knesset because they don't serve the interests of the state of Israel. She would look for any possible excuse to go, oh, well, we gave them a chance. They would not accept the sovereign power. Therefore, I am forced to do this thing. Colonial powers love doing this. Isaac asks, can you talk about the settlement outpost movement and your role in that, especially with young people that you've served as somewhat of an inspiration for? And she replies, a post is a basis for a bigger community. That's the name of the game. Isaac asks, and why is that controversial, even among some settlers? But she replies, I don't know that it's controversial. Some might not know the process. And people say to me, quote, I want you to build a new outpost that will be as nice as the older one. And we see. And I say to them, it was a place with one family and now hundreds of families, so this is how that started. In Israel, there's a lot of support for settlements, and this is why there have been right-wing governments for so many years. The world, especially the United States, thinks there is an option for a Palestinian state, and if we continue to build communities, then we block the option for a Palestinian state. We want to close the option for a Palestinian state, and the world wants to leave the option open. It's a very simple thing to understand. Isaac says, when Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005, it also closed down settlements in the region. This was under the Sharon government. And there's been talk by some settlers since October 7th about the need to repopulate Gaza with settlements. What are your feelings about what should happen with Gaza? To which she replies, right now I'm on my way to a TV interview where I'm going to speak about our movement's effort to return to Gaza, the entire Gaza, and build settlements. So there you go. She says Palestinians can live under us as long as they're second-class citizens, but Gaza already was packed full of second-class citizen Palestinians, and she's just like, yeah, we should just completely repopulate it with Jews. So, pretty unambiguous. Isaac asks, so you think it was a mistake to pull out of settlements nearly 20 years ago? And she replies, it was a mistake. The whole world is crying now because of that. The whole world suffers from Hamas's rise. Not my problem, it's your problem. No country in the world said they were going to accept even 1,000 people from Gaza. The world hates them. It was such a big mistake to let them rise. Notice how she effortlessly transposes, referring to the rise of Hamas with accepting 1,000 people from Gaza. To her, Palestinians in Gaza are Hamas. She with no qualification, she just shifts here. Hamas, people in Gaza. They are the same to her. Isaac asks, where should the Palestinians in Gaza go? And she replies, to Sinai, to Egypt, to Turkey. Isaac replies, they're not Egyptian or Turkish, though. Why would they go to Turkey? To which she replies, okay. The Ukrainians are not French, but when the war started, they went to many countries. Notice here how she is positively comparing what she's doing to the invasion from Russia. Like, she's like shrugging, like, yeah, you know, when people are invaded, they flee. So remember, to a fascist, might makes right. Consistently, this is actually good logic from her. What she's essentially saying is that we're the sovereign, this is our land, we're the strong, they leave when we invade. And the interviewer is like, well, why would they do that? And she shrugs and essentially says, because that's what the weaker people do. And she's correct in that, just monstrous. The interviewer asks, their country was being bombed, so many of them fled west. And she says, and Gazan people are dying to go to other places. The interviewer asks, I think Ukrainians wanted to go to Europe because they didn't want to get bombed. To which she says, and the Gazan people want to get bombed by us? Again, might makes right. It's not like even an ethical thing. It's just, this is the ethnic group that I'm defending. We're bombing them. Of course we're bombing them because we're strong. If they don't want to get bombed, they have to leave. Interviewer replies, maybe one option, rather than bombing them, would be to help try and develop a society for them in Gaza, right? To which she replies, no doubt laughing, okay, I wish you luck. Go ahead. Go for it. Interviewer asks, do you feel that Netanyahu and the people in his government are sympathetic to you and your cause? To which she replies, he's very sympathetic, but he's not as brave as we are. This is what American Nazis said and say about Trump, where they'll say, like, yeah, Trump's totally with us. Trump loves QAnon. Trump loves the alt-right. Trump didn't denounce us after Charlottesville. Trump didn't denounce the Proud Boys. But then they're like, well, he's still a politician, so he has to, like, keep it in check, you know? Nazis love to say this shit. The interviewer asks, what about Smotrich and people like that? To which she replies, they are brave, but the settlers themselves, which I represent in my movement, are more brave than them. Editor's note, Smotrich is also a settler. The interviewer asks, we saw some horrible images on October 7th of what happened to Israeli children, and now we see some horrible images in Gaza of what is happening to Palestinian children. When you see Palestinian children dying, what's your emotional reaction as a human being? To which she says, I go by a very basic human law of nature. My children are prior to the children of the enemy, period. They are first, my children are first. To which the interviewer says, we are talking about children. I don't know if the law of nature is what we need to be looking at here. To which she says, yeah, I say my children are first. So that's about as direct and unambiguous as you can get, and that's at the end of the interview right there. So that, you know, pretty clear, pretty clear cut. Honestly, so straightforward that it's not even. It feels sort of unnecessary to like annotate it with much in the same way that I said, you know, just mentally insert me saying she's evil. And you kind of get that. So I know that people sometimes accuse me of overplaying this hand a bit, but this is one of the reasons why I'm so consistent when I stress on the whole Blitler, Jitler, whatever thing. It's that, like, in the world today, there are more authoritarian governments than there are proper democracies. And historically, authoritarianism is by far the norm. Democracy is the aberration. It's an aberration we have to fight for. When people treat the Nazis as some kind of ultimate, unique, horrible evil that can't be replicated, they're doing the Nazis and people like them a favor. In reality, the underlying logic of fascism, which almost necessarily builds itself on ethnic replacement or genocide, it's infinitely replicable. Everything about the Nazis, every single element was meaningfully influential in leading up to the Holocaust or World War II, can be replicated by any country, of any people, any ethnicity, any religion, any reason. No group is exempt from this. This person is ideologically, essentially just a Nazi with the proper nouns switched around. But I think that what she's saying here and what she's advocating for, the language that echoes in the way the alt-right in America talks is just so chilling, right? Especially to me, the whole Netanyahu is sympathetic to us, but he has to play it cool because he's a politician thing. It's like so on the nose. It's so direct. I'm reading her Wikipedia page, and she really likes assaulting police officers. Under any other context, this would be based, but I think she's assaulting them because they're like protecting Palestinian people or something. It's like how a lot of alt-right figures have histories with incarceration as well. Arrested and convicted with respect to rioting by Israeli settlers in the city of Kalkilia. Charged with obstructing a police officer in the line of duty and assaulting a police officer. Obstructing a police officer for what again? Well, what am I to do with that? Then the year after being released for that assault, she assaults again and obstructs an investigation. That was an investigation into the destruction of Palestinian property, if I remember correctly. Wow, she got a whole 2 days under house arrest. Would you believe me if I told you that settlers get preferential treatment in the by Israeli police and in the courts as compared to the Palestinians they murder? Would you believe such a thing? Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed staring into the heart of darkness for a little bit. Jesus.